Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for finding us on your favorite podcast app. You can also find us, however, on Dash Radio. Download the Dash Radio app for free, then search for Nothing But Net. That's where you find us every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific. If you want your sports talk a little bit different at that hour, I'm now hosting a show on onsideradio.com. Check out the website, ONSIDE radio.com. That's the 5 Reasons Sports Hour. We do some Heat there, but also we cover all of the other South Florida sports, and I bring on only 5 Reasons Sports guests. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com. That is the website where you go for free content. We do not beg you to pay us $3 a month there. So go to 5reasonsports.com for all the latest Heat stories from Brady Hawk and others. And of course, all of our Dolphins content from Josh Houts, Alfredo Arteaga, and everyone else. And our YouTube channel, now over 8,000 subscribers. Check out all of the new shows on that channel, including a new show that includes our guy, Louis Sung, which is called 5 Reasons Unscripted. So that's reacting to the stories of the day. Today, they took on the Xavier Howard situation and how much of those trade rumors are actually real. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that includes markbrown.pa. This is a real estate litigation and transaction law firm, both commercial and residential, with a full-service attorney-owned title company. More of you should be taking advantage of this, particularly in this housing market. A $295 closing fee on all refinances and purchases when mentioning 5 Reasons. That's a $295 closing fee. They handle evictions for landlords and for tenants, so both sides of it, and they offer flat fee evictions. Practicing for nearly 15 years, email is a good way to get them at MARC, that's Mark, at markbrownpa.com, or call the office at 954-566-5678. Again, that's 954-566-5678. markbrownpa.com. Again, mention 5 Reasons, $295 closing fee on all refinances and all purchases. And now, today's episode of 5 on the Floor.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, with Alphonse Sidney, Alex Toledo, and Greg Sylvander. Part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the Floor. Here is today's floor plan. Make sure you checked out the first episode of our series. We did 5 episodes. We're going to do 5 episodes reacting to Pat Riley's presser from last Friday. 5 different themes from a lot of it's from stuff I tweeted out at the 5 Reasons Sports account. Just gave us some ideas. We did a sort of a pre-episode where we responded to the controversy, which was really a non-controversy, over Riley's comments related to Astros and the Lakers. Completely taken out of context. And I can just say now that Greg Sylvander and I were right on all of it, because today the chief clown, the prime idiot, Skip Bayless, reacted to it on Undisputed and on his Twitter account, basically going at Riley for questioning whether the Lakers won legitimately, which of course is not what he said. This was bastardized for clicks, and it of course ended up in Undisputed and ESPN, which is what we figured. All right, today I've got Alex Toledo. We're going to get to the second topic here today, and that was this. Pat Riley talked about his young players during that presser, and you got a little bit of a better sense, although he tries not to give too much away, about who's untouchable and who might be had. And so Alex and I are going to go through these tweets, and we're going to go through some of these players. Here was some of what he said. This is some of what he said related to his young core. He said on Tyler Herro, how he grew through listening. He grew through the mentorship of Udonis, Jimmy Butler, Goran, Andre. All these veterans took him under their wing because they saw something special in him. Also, this is another one. This was also related to Tyler. He said, Tyler Herro will go to another level when he gets older. He just turned 20. My gosh, he had a great year. What a young nucleus we have that can play. 2 more. Riley said he didn't know that Bam would be an all-star this quickly. We just knew his character. And then he talked again about the jump that Bam can take. And then this one as well, he was talking about Adebayo. And he said, when it comes to our players, we want to take care of them, especially the ones we really value. We value Bam Adebayo, although he didn't really want to get into the extension. So, Alex, I bring you in on this. You saw the presser. You were on the presser. He talked a lot about Herro. He talked a lot about Bam. He didn't talk as much about Duncan. He said he felt sorry for Derrick Jones Jr. for not getting as much time during the postseason. Nobody asked him about KZ Okpala, so he was not brought up.
That was my fault. I should have brought that up.
Yeah, you should have asked it on the call. He mentioned K9 a lot, which is Kendrick. What did you make of it? What did you make of who he talked about and who he didn't talk about?
I think that's just his way of processing what he saw out there. Maybe, I think Herro and Bam are the guys who most clearly took the leap on the floor and more of a traditional leap. I think all of us, and not that Pat doesn't feel this way, but I think all of us do feel that Duncan is kind of right there. Just because of what, the type of impact that he had for them this season. And, you can make an argument that he was their most important offensive player throughout the season. We saw in the playoffs that things change and, somebody could have seen that coming regardless, but Duncan Robinson is still there. I think it has to do more with Herro and Bam and the leap that's shown on the floor. And not only that, those are obviously the younger guys and the guys who have taken this leap so early in their careers. And Duncan Robinson, he's obviously early in his career, but it's just, I think, tough to put him on the same level as Bam and Herro, who, are still in their early 20s. And that's when, you typically see stars take those leaps early on. Like that's a sign of people who are going to have a perennial all-star careers. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's really, he's separating the two.
Well, let's start with Bam because he was asked about the most. And he did, the extension, he said that's just not a topic we're going to get into during this time. Obviously, it's on their mind. Obviously, it's something they're going to discuss with the agent. Obviously, it's something that they've discussed with Bam. I mean, you can't forget. Although Riley was not, others were in the bubble with Bam for almost 3 months, right? So this certainly came up. And then there were some reports about how, I don't even know why this is coming out, but Zach Harper, I think, reported that if anybody calls the Heat about Bam, they're hanging up. Of course, I love Zach, but of course they're hanging up. I mean, they're not trading Bam Adebayo. But where do you think, from what you gauge from what Riley talked about, do you think he views him as someone who can be a superstar? We now know he's an all-star. But, to me, superstar is top 10 player who, if he's the best player on your team, you have a chance to win a championship. Is he there? Can he get there?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think it's just tough to argue that given how close they were to winning a championship. I mean, being 2 wins away, even with all the circumstances, like I do think like they're just so ahead of schedule that it's really easy to sell yourself on all these things now. And I don't even mean that in a sense of when I say sell yourself, I don't think that's a bad sell at all. Like I'm really in on Bam. I'm in on Bam as much as anybody. Like I think Bam, the leap that he took this year, he took 2 separate leaps. Like we saw what he turned into in the Boston series. And, you can say that was a good matchup for him. And it was because they were a smaller team. But we know where Bam can get better. And we know the type of impact he has now and how multi-skilled and multi-versatile he is. He's like the key chess piece for Spo, where, I was kind of thinking about it. I would say that I think Bam is their most important defensive player, with Jimmy being second, and then you got it the other way around. I think on offense, when you're talking about in the the highest leverage circumstances, I think they're kind of 1A and 1B to each other on offense and defense. And I think again they 2 wins away from a championship. Like I'm going to keep repeating that they did that with Jimmy and Bam as their 2 best players, surrounded by shooters and enough defenders. Like I think they just need to add a little bit, and because of that, I think Riley's like, okay, Bam was the second best player on the team that was that close. We could still use somebody else, but I think he sees Bam as that guy, like part of a big 3 possibly, or he's on that level.
What comes next for him though? Because there are other elements of his game that we talked about during the season. I know Spoelstra pushed back on it, said that, everybody could stick it up their rear, whatever. If you wanted to question the way that Bam was playing or the way Bam was being used, but we talked about stuff, right? And we talked about it, more confidence in the 12 to 14 foot jumper, a little bit more back to the basket play, a little bit more overall aggression. I don't think the passing needs much improvement. I don't think the defense needs much more improvement. To me, it's a mindset thing. But if you could choose one thing, like what is the one thing that he can do that you can go into a game next year, not just thinking he's going to affect the game in a variety of different ways and be an impact guy, but that he's going to be the guy. Okay, that he's going to have the game he had against Washington in the regular season, or a couple of the ones he had in the postseason, that like you're going to get a Bam Adebayo who can put a team on his back What is the thing he needs to
That's
do?
a tough question. That's a tricky question, I think. And I'm not just, it's not a cop-up. I just think that Bam's game isn't tailored to that. I don't think he wants to be that guy. I don't know that he's aiming to be that guy. Like, I do think Bam wants to be the best player he can be, but we all want him to score more. And I do think he can and will eventually, but I don't think he's a guy who you necessarily put the team on his back as far as an offensive load. Like, I do think he's already plenty involved with the offense, and we expect, and that was just in the first season. Like, I think his overall impact, especially like specifically on what you saw in the playoffs and their run, was of somebody who's a top 15 player. I think there's no doubt about it. You can haggle about who's there and who's above who, but he is absolutely giving you that type of impact because of everything he's doing for them on defense, solving all of their defensive mistakes. Like, I mean, when you talk about the way that they went from a, kind of an average defensive team throughout the regular season to a very good one in the playoffs, like, I think a lot of that had to do with Bam solving a lot of problems, and obviously Spo doing a lot of great things with the defensive game plans and the zoning and all that. But I think Bam is already has the impact of that guy. And then on top of that, he just in the playoffs, he was putting up 20, 10, and 5 like on a regular basis without having much more to his scoring game. And he's obviously gotten better throughout the years. I'm not going to sit here and act like he hasn't improved his scoring game since he got drafted. He obviously has. But at the end of the day, like, all I want for him is to keep adding to that range. I don't really necessarily think he needs to do much else. I think his game is about making reads and operating in that motion offense and in the system and making the right play, whether it's passing or scoring or you know what I'm saying? Passing to the right guy or scoring at the right time. He's somebody who would rather do it at the end of the possession. And I think him just developing that range a little bit more just gives him another option that he can go to when he sees fit.
You mentioned, 2015 or 20, what was it? 2010 and 5. I mean, he did that in the finals game when we were all criticizing him the whole game for the way he was playing. He still put up the numbers. So it's crazy. He was almost doing that automatically at that point.
He was banged up.
When that happened, right, when he was banged up, but people will recognize him as a superstar. But it is about doing it consistently and putting a team on his back at the end in the way that Jimmy did, right? Like, that's to me where Jimmy separated himself again as the most important player on this team, when I think all year we talked about it being Bam. And I think in so many ways, Bam's excellence, like I said, offensively, defensively, he's so important to everything they do. But Jimmy has that dog mentality where he will take over.
He also had so many tries at being that guy already. Like, he knows what it takes. He's not phased. And obviously Bam wasn't either with the way that he stepped up. But think about all the leaps that Bam took since, the Hassan trade happened. And we were like, yeah, he's going to step in and be a great starter and, give you 15, 10, and 5 or whatever, which is already good. But look at what he turned into by the end of the playoff run, even when he was banged up. Like, I just think, and this is his first year as a starter. We know it was an elongated year, but like, imagine Bam with just a few more years, a couple of years under his belt. Like, I just think he's going to keep turning into the best version of himself from here, given the arc that he's taken.
And Jimmy didn't get those reps early in his career either. Bam may get a more opportunity for more of them, but early
Bam just got to the finals in his first year as a starter.
But those were Derrick Rose's reps early in Jimmy's career, right? Those were to a certain degree Luol Deng's reps, right? Like, those were not that Noah was a scorer, but they played through Noah. Like, Jimmy really wasn't given those chances until what? Like, Rose declined, right? Like, Rose got hurt and then declined and then left. Like, he wasn't getting, so Bam's going to get a chance for those reps earlier in his career. Like you're saying, he's only 23. Whether he has that kind of dog mentality that Jimmy has, I think that is really going to be Jimmy's. I think a lot of this year was Jimmy getting Bam to believe in himself. But I think now the next step in their relationship as basketball players and Jimmy as a leader is bringing it out of Bam more often. Okay. He sort of already convinced Bam that you're really good and you're a teammate I want to play with. And I thought that was huge for Bam this year. But now it's like, listen, you see what I just did in the finals? You can do that too. And I think that's what they're going to work on with
Ethan. I don't think anything you're saying is unfair, but I'm also of the mindset that when he was healthy, and by the way, that Lakers matchup, I'm not going to excuse, when he didn't play great, he wasn't healthy and it was a bad matchup and he still put up numbers. Like you said, I don't even want to talk about that series. It's very sad and depressing, and we know that the team just wasn't healthy whatsoever. But when he was healthy versus that Boston series, once again, a favorable matchup for him, and against Milwaukee, which by the way, a big team that was very good at protecting the rim, similar to the Lakers, he showed out and he did that. Like he stepped up his game. And I'm not saying he went to the Jimmy level. He, you know, other than that one game versus Boston, it was a game 6 where he had that one insane game.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, like I think he really stepped up his game. I think he stepped up the offensive scoring output when needed. And I don't think they're going to need more from him throughout the regular season, even no matter what they do this offseason. Like I think if they go into the next season with a very similar team and similar core, I think you're going to see Bam with similar numbers, you know, maybe just an extra point or two on the board. But I don't think they need that much more from him offensively other than when you get to high leverage, the biggest stages, right? Because I think that's when the things get the toughest. And I do think that we saw a lot of really good stuff there. Like I think it's more positive than negative. He's obviously not a finished product, but I'm feeling really good about that specific part you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on the next guy we're going to talk about after this word from Safe Cubbies.
I want to introduce you to another of the great new sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and it is a sponsor that would be important in any time if you want to have a beautiful workspace, but it's especially important now when you need a safe one as well, and that's safecubbies.com, which offers modular office solutions designed to elevate your open office into a modern and safe environment at any budget. You can personalize your workspace with options like whiteboards, magnetic panels, acrylic sheets, and graphic branding. Most of the surfaces are non-porous for easy cleaning and can be removed or replaced within minutes. Now, this is for workplaces. They've got a bunch of different options on their professional series, but also they've got private room solutions, dividers and sneeze guards, and they have a classroom series as well. So if you're involved with a school, this is definitely something your school should check out, of course, if we have school in the fall. And that's the point here. We're entering a new normal period with COVID-19. Safecubbies.com, which is locally owned, is the place that you want to go. The phone number is 754-216-1071. Again, that's 754-216-1071 or safecubbies.com.
All right, so you talk about whether or not Bam needs to score more, whether that needs to be a big part of his role late. A lot of that may not be necessary if Tyler Herro takes the jump. Do we agree here real quick? Bam Adebayo is untouchable this offseason.
Untouchable this offseason, untouchable for the next 8 years probably.
Okay, so now the question becomes the second guy. Tyler Herro, to me, is untouchable except in the most unique possible.
Back to asterisk talk?
Like probably – well, it's asterisk. It's probably except for the thing that's not going to happen. Okay, so a lot of the conversation we're having about Tyler Herro is, would they trade him? And my answer to that is, well, they would trade pretty much anybody, although I think we agree they won't trade Bam Adebayo unless the perfect player comes along. And I just don't think that player is going to come along. And so I think that this debate we have about Tyler Herro, about whether he's untouchable, I think it's a fun debate to have. That's why we're having it again. But I just don't, I mean, to me, you're really only talking about like 2 or 3 players in the league that I think they would even entertain the thought for, which I think is where they were with Bam a year ago, but now they're here with Herro. And that player, you know, is probably Bradley Beal. And I just don't think Bradley Beal's going anywhere.
I've got him in mind, and I got the other one that we've mentioned throughout the past few months.
And who's the
Mitchell.
other one? Okay. But again, Donovan Mitchell has essentially committed. I mean, both of these guys, like, no, but I don't understand, but well, apparently he prepared his relationship a little with Gobert. Okay. He told Yahoo, he told Chris Haynes that he plans to sign the extension. Beal has committed a number of times to Washington.
It's just a waiting game at this point for them to see if things will change at some point. But I'm not as sure that they're all the way committed.
How much do they have to change for Donovan Mitchell, though? That's a playoff team.
It's a good team.
It's not like Washington. Washington's been in a rebuild for years.
Yeah, that Jazz team was a good team, man. I think they may be a little bit capped out as far as not money wise, but just how far they can go. As good as they are, like, it's just the Warriors are going to be back next season, and then you still got all these other powerhouses in the West. Denver's only going to get better from here. They're probably going to, rejigger their roster a little bit in the offseason too. Like, I just think, it could get into his head at some point, right? I think it's just a waiting game to see what happens in the beginning of the season, or if not, see what happens in the next playoff run a year from now. But I think that's long-term stuff with Mitchell and Beal at this point. Like, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, you've got a major age difference there too. I mean, Donovan Mitchell is what?
And I think that's why
23?
I think that's why you consider those guys, and especially Mitchell, because he not only is he younger, but he already has the two-way game that you're looking for, and he's proved it as a 1A scoring option. So I would be surprised if they weren't also just monitoring that situation, given other intel that I'm sure that you know about with Donovan Mitchell.
Well, they're monitoring every situation.
Exactly.
I mean, Mitchell's 24. He just turned 24 in September.
Mm-hmm.
So he's entering he's on the very front end of his prime. Okay, very front end.
Rookie deal.
Rookie deal, but which is why, again, if you're Utah, you don't do it. But he's not at the point of frustration. Like usually, the player that ends up in Miami is the player who is frustrated with his current circumstance. So he's reached a certain point, and either he's fed up. Here's a few cases. Shaq had won championships, but he was fed up with the Lakers because of a contract situation, because he felt like he wasn't getting enough credit next to Kobe and all of that stuff, and that made him available. Alonzo Mourning was upset because of a contract situation, also felt like things were maxed out a little in Charlotte, didn't get along with Larry Johnson, so there were a number of things at play. Jamal Mashburn was available because things didn't work out with Kidd and with Jimmy Jackson. He was kind of entering that stage where he was ready to win, and that team wasn't winning. Mm-hmm. Jimmy Butler had frustration because he was playing with players he didn't think were winners. There always is something that pushes somebody, but usually the player is a little bit older than Donovan Mitchell. Usually the player has reached a point where he's frustrated with where he's at. Chris Bosh was what? How old was Chris? 27 when he came down? Because he was wasn't LeBron's age.
I think the unique thing, yeah, you're right. I think the unique thing with Mitchell is that he has been the 1A scoring option since year one and has done it in the playoffs since year one. So it's almost like an accelerated time. Yeah. Like he's had by the time that let's say he stays for one more season in Utah, at least he's already going to have so much more like playoff experience and like unique playoff experience and important playoff experience as the 1A guy on a good team, more than like than Chris Bosh did, like you're talking about, or a lot of other people at that age or after their rookie deal. But even the point that I was just going to make with basically the one that you were getting at was, Mitchell and Beal are the type of guys that you even think about trading Herro for. And then you talk about like Barry Jackson of Miami Herald today had this huge article going through all these names for either this offseason or next offseason. And he kind of mentioned that, Lillard and McCollum have both shown respect and in recent times towards the Heat and liking Miami and all of that. And I think Lillard is probably the third guy that you throw in there. Is like, okay, you probably have to give up Herro, maybe somebody else like a Harden. You know what I'm saying? It has to be that level of guy though. And I think it's crazy that we're talking about Herro that way, even though, they didn't give him up for Chris Paul or Westbrook last season. We know that could have happened. So maybe it's not surprising, but it is pretty crazy to me.
Well, Lillard is in that bracket that I talk about. Like Lillard is the type of player, late 20s, hasn't won yet, carried a team, feels blocked, sees an organization that may be able to get him a little bit further. Not that Portland's a bad organization, but it's just easier to attract guys to Miami. He's the type, except he's also the loyal type. Yeah. So he's really tough to crack. Like he
openly making fun of other stars for leaving the organization.
Right. He would fit the profile in every other way. He also is really tight with Myers Leonard, who I'm sure has told him plenty about the Heat organization that is positive. So it's like he fits the profile in every way, except he wants to be Kevin Garnett. Until Kevin Garnett got totally sick of it in his 30s and agreed to the trade to Boston. But that was Garnett. Garnett and Lillard to me are the same. Garnett would not leave Minnesota. They maxed out as a conference finals team.
Elite talent, and then ends up maybe somewhere else at the end and is fully appreciated, like Garnett was fully appreciated in Boston, even though he wasn't the same player he was in Minnesota. That may end up happening. But let's cycle it back to Herro because I want to have time to get to the other two guys. We only got a few minutes left. When Pat talks about Herro, he talks about a guy like he's almost surprised how good he's going to be. Like, even though Pat was selling him to us on draft night, when everybody was like, what, they drafted this guy with this white kid with short arms who played 1 year at Kentucky, didn't really get going until halfway through the season. And Pat was saying, just trust me. He had one of the best workouts we've ever seen. He thinks the game. He's a gym rat. I hate using that phrase, but you know what I mean. Okay. He's totally into it. He wants to win. All the things he said about that. And we were like, okay, let's see it. Whatever. Okay, let's see it.
And now we've seen it. And now we've seen the confidence in him in the fourth quarters and more fourth quarter minutes than any other player, and the big shots and the 37 against, against Milwaukee, against Boston, and all the other things that he did. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now I almost feel like he's gotten ahead of where Pat thought he would be. Right.
Yeah.
like Pat was convincing us. And then I think Herro's convincing Pat. I might have like a legitimate, like, multi-time All-Star. And I saw Zach Harper also tweeted today something that I tweeted months and months ago, which is the Heat organization told Tyler Herro early in the season, where he kept saying, I want to be like Devin Booker. And they kept telling him, you can be better than Devin Booker as an all-around player. But I don't know that Pat fully believed that until he saw it in the postseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I definitely agree with you. That's what I saw too. Just seeing him express himself on that Zoom call. It was like a genuine, and I think it's to a similar degree what he was doing with Bam too. It's like these guys, again, ahead of schedule. Like I think he's surprised to agree, and I think it makes him even more confident in his coaching staff. And I think that's why he was praising everybody. Like he really praised everybody on that call, and it was very genuine. I think he probably does that every year to a degree. But man, like I know he's got to be impressed with just how far along they've come in such little time, and given all the circumstances. And I think it really is a similar thing with Herro and Bam. The Herro thing, man, like you look at somebody who can step up his game in the playoffs when it comes to, you're getting tougher looks and teams are scouting for you, and he steps up. He takes the shots. He makes the right reads. He's not too arrogant. Like he obviously struggled versus the Lakers. I think he was put in a really bad position as a rookie to take on that load with Dragic and Bam out, who were responsible for so much of that offense. I think people underestimate just how much Dragic and Bam do for the offense. And I don't think Herro was ready for that role, but he is absolutely ahead of time. And that's why we're talking about him like this. You would only trade him for a certain level of guy, a certain caliber player, is because look at what he's doing as a rookie. He's added to his game since Summer League. He's added to his game since the bubble started. He just keeps getting better. And you could tell that he is just a hooper. And the whole gym rat thing is an interesting conversation, because why does that have a positive connotation when the word rat is in it? It's very interesting. It's a good point by you.
Well,
but I think Herro is that guy.
It's always used for the white guy who's drafted. But he was speaking about him in the context.
Herro loves that though. Herro loves that.
I know that. But here's the thing that Herro and Bam did. I thought it was a remarkable comment from Pat that didn't get enough attention, where Pat basically said he's okay drafting guys now because they come in more ready than they used to be. Now, maybe it's because he's only drafting Calipari's players now instead of Duke guys or anybody else. But it's like Herro and Bam not only have, I think they exceeded his own expectations, because he even said with Bam, I knew his character. Did I know he would be an all-star this quickly? No. They drafted two guys thinking that they could become what they've become already, maybe in year 4 or 5. I think that's what's happened here. I think Bam became it in the year 3, and Herro became, again, accelerated in year 1.
Do you think Pat thought that Bam could do this in his first season as a starter, do what he did at the end of the season?
No.
That's why I think it's really that's genuine. Like, just he's genuinely impressed with what they've done and what the coaching staff have done, because I really do think it's like 50-50.
Yes, I agree. But a lot of it is the way they came in, but a lot of it is what the coaches have done with them. But it's changed Pat's attitude on the draft. Man. I mean, from covering Pat for 25 years, it's changed his whole attitude on the draft. And that's amazing. And that's going to play into another episode, which we're going to do. So we're not covering it here, but what they do with the 20th pick, because I think the assumption is you trade the pick. But if Pat has become enamored with some of these guys who come out, he might make the decision on draft night, because they have to make the pick. Okay, they have to make the pick, but they can trade the pick after.
Like he said, we're going to use the pick. No, how did he say?
He said, we're going to use the pick. We may not keep him. Whether
we keep it remains to be seen.
But they may decide to keep the pick if he loves the player who falls to him. So I think he's keeping his options open there too. All right, we've got some more young players to get to here real quick after a word from Manscaped. We'll get back to our episode here in a second. Before we do, I want to tell you about another of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Knicks are no good in the NBA. You're familiar with that? The Knicks are no good. Well, Knicks are no good when you're shaving certain parts of your body either. So that's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created. I never thought I would actually say that on a podcast. And just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0. Their third generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to advanced skin safe technology pioneered by Manscaped. When I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes, so you can take a longer shave. The waterproof technology allows you to groom in the shower. One of the coolest features is the LED light, which illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trimming. And let's not forget about the charging stand. Show your mower off loud and proud, because this intelligently designed stand is a convenient charging dock powered by USB. If you're listening to me speak right now, I want you to experience it firsthand for yourself. Make sure you trim yourself. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code 5RSN at manscaped.com. And now this is where I end my career. Your balls will thank you. And now back to the episode. All right, Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the floor. I thought what was interesting about this presser was, again, a lot of Bam and Herro talks, but a lot of it was based on the questions that were asked. You mentioned earlier, nobody asked him about Okpala. Nobody really asked him about Duncan Robinson, though, either. And with Kendrick Nunn, he wasn't asked directly, but he referenced him a lot. So let's go through these quickly. Duncan Robinson, do you think that the Heat, after what they saw in the postseason, but also the fact that they had the number one offense in the league when he played during the regular season and actually during the early parts of the playoffs, do you think they view him as untouchable?
I mean, again, like what you were saying earlier, untouchable to a degree, right? And I'm not saying that Herro and Duncan are necessarily on that same level. Like, I don't think they're looking to trade Duncan Robinson at all. I mean, I obviously don't have any information, but from what we can tell, I just think he is so obviously important to what they do, where it's like, yeah, we would only trade this guy if we had to. He's obviously older than Bam and Herro by a few years. But again, somebody who just, was the deadliest three-point shooting weapon in his first year, basically, right? Like, he did not get any type of significant playing type at all last season, other than in Wade's last game where he just was on the floor all the time for whatever reason. But Spo called him the best shooter in the league before the season started. We all looked at him kind of weird, looked at him kind of funny, and then he proved that in his first season as a starter. So I don't think Duncan should be too far off. Again, I think he's that important, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're just like, yeah, it would really take – he would have to be the last piece of something pretty big, I think, for you to trade him. Like, I don't think they're going to be looking to trade him at all.
He feels more to me like the Caron Butler in this equation. I don't think I don't think the Heat went into Caron's third season, or third off season, thinking they were going to move him, but thinking that they could. And then Shaq fell to them. And then it was kind of like, okay, Dwayne Wade was the piece that the Lakers would have wanted, but we'll give you Caron. Okay. And I think it could be like this, where it may be Herro is the piece that another team wants. No, but we'll give you Duncan.
But does that get you something that good? I know that you're obviously not talking about, like him by himself. I'm sure.
Well, Butler you were throwing in Odom too. So, I mean, there was another big piece. I mean, there would have to be, is Kendrick Nunn with Duncan enough? Is that Caron and Lamar? No, but you're also probably not getting like Shaq.
A package of Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, let's say a pick and, salary cap filler plus whatever else is necessary to make a trade work. Like, I don't know what type of guy you're getting with that package. And I think that's why I'm skeptical on, like, I do get what you mean in general, conceptually, because I do think like he's probably the guy you're willing to part with most before you go to Herro or Bam if you're trying to get a real big name player. I just don't know that type of package gets you that guy. It would have to be one of those situations again where somebody, demands that they go to one team. And even then it's like Duncan Robinson is what, 26 years old, 25?
Well, that's the other thing. He's 26. I mean, you're talking about, I mean, he's not old, but he's also, I mean, he's in what you typically would say is your prime, but he's only played one full season.
Yeah. And I think that's why, he's a great piece and why you don't want to trade him. But again, it's like, who's the best player that you can get with that package? And that's why I'm skeptical of the point of trading him. Because it's like, we talked all this time about not trading Herro for Oladipo. Like, would you throw him as part of an Oladipo package? I'm not good with that. I'm not good with that for probably a lot of the guys that we talked about, especially if they're over 30. Like, I don't know. I think the Duncan thing, it's something that you got to be really, really careful with because you could mess with something special. I think the shooting that they have between Duncan and Herro, and then obviously the rest of the team, Goran was an awesome shooter for them this year. Like, I just think they got to bottle that up and try to keep that as much as they can. I think the motion offense works so well because you have so many weapons and these shooting weapons as off-ball threats. And I think like we've been talking about, you want to add to that. And I think trading Duncan, it would have to be for the right guy.
Do you think that most fans would be okay if to get Oladipo if Duncan Robinson was the primary piece that they traded?
That's actually a good question. Most means more than 50-50, so I'm going to say most fans would not be happy with it. But I don't know, because then I feel like when you see that news, like let's say it's kind of unexpected, you just see Wojnarowski or somebody else announce that, and then you see the Photoshops is quickly going to change the other direction.
Mm-hmm. But
I do think there's going to be a significant chunk that are going to be pretty, upset by it, even if they are cool with Oladipo. I think Duncan has gotten to that, and I think we've all just kind of pounded it so much about his impact. I think it's impossible to miss. Like, I think any fan who watched the regular season could see what type of threat he was, and then in the playoffs it got a little bit weirder because he didn't have as many crazy flamethrower games. But it's just the rest of their guys stepped up because of the way that they were really overplaying him on defense. Like, I just think he is not somebody you give up unless it's for a top tier talent, like somebody that is comparable to Bam or Jimmy or slightly below. I don't think Oladipo's that guy. Like, do you throw him in for Jrue Holiday? I don't know, man. I really don't know. I love Jrue Holiday. I love his game. I love his fit with this team. I don't know that you do that. I think they really have something special brewing there. And I think ideally, maybe it is an ideal world. Ideally, you add somebody to that core.
I think the way that he will look at this, and then I want to move to Nunn and DJJ. I think the way they'll look at this is that Pat Riley is going to look at everything now through the microcosm of the last 5 minutes of a playoff game. And we are at that level now with Boston, with the Lakers, with the Clippers, with the Denver. We're in that tier now. Okay. And with the Milwaukee, obviously. Okay. And who can I put on the floor and trust on the floor and is going to make us better in the last 5 minutes of games? And I think what was proven out this year and where Herro elevated himself over Duncan, in addition to the age, obviously, and the overall potential, is that, did Tyler have some defensive issues down the stretch? Yes. Did he have some issues in terms of his ball handling, particularly in the Lakers series? Absolutely. But you were still going to play Tyler Herro in those minutes because of his ability, his shot creation, the other things that he was providing, the growth that you were seeing. I think with Duncan, it's a little bit more of an open question. I'm with you about his contribution, the way he opens up the offense, the fact that Jimmy and Bam need a shooter like that. I'm with you on all of it. But I think Pat's going to look at this through a very small prism now. We are close. What's going to decide us winning a championship? Do we win those last 5 minutes?
Ethan, can I pose the question to you? That's a conversation
he's got to have with Eric, which is Duncan Robinson playable in those last 5 minutes? If he's not, he'll move him.
I don't think that he's been necessarily been deemed unplayable. Like, I think he obviously was taken out of the fourth quarter lineups a few times, and we saw that consistent lineup of Crowder and Herro alongside Jimmy, Bam, and who am I missing? I'm sorry.
It was Goran, right?
There. Goran, yes. I don't know what happened there. But, we saw that lineup a lot. But I think Duncan got plenty of time in the fourth quarters and in big games. And I just think, like, they get to those fourth quarters and they get to that winning record and to beating these types of teams and surprising everybody, partly because it's just that elite shooting that they have. It is not just Duncan. Like, I don't think Duncan is carrying it, but he was the best one. I know that Herro's more dynamic. I just think, and this is why I wanted to pose a question to you, who is a guy that you do that package for that we talked about where it's multiple things and then Duncan is
Drew.
So you do pull that trigger.
Yes, absolutely. If you
knowing that he's not gonna, even if you don't know if he's not gonna opt out.
If you believe that you can work out something with him once you get him in the building that's in the best interest of the franchise, which I think they would, to me, Jrue Holiday is such a difference maker for this team because, look, obviously you want as much shooting as you can possibly get. I understand Duncan's importance. There's no question Jrue Holiday is going to be on the floor in those final 5 minutes, okay? He is on the floor, both ends, okay? You're going to have him out there defensively, and you're going to have him out there offensively because he's shown he can do it both ways. And I just think he is a heat player through and through in every possible way. They have such admiration for him. I do not do it for Oladipo.
Crazy for somebody that
Okay.
spent so much time coming up in the Sixers culture.
Right, but he came up in the Sixers he was dumped before the process. He was dumped as part of the process because he was dumped for the draft pick that picked up Nerlens Noel, and all the geniuses, all the analytics geniuses in the basketball media. It's the greatest trade you've ever made. You got the rights of Nerlens Noel. Okay, how did that work out? Okay, Drew Holiday was a young player at that point who was still coming into his own, but had already established himself as an elite defender and a very playable point guard.
Drew would have been really helpful throughout the. I mean, for
my
Philly.
God, Drew is exactly what the Sixers need, to be honest. Okay, but also what the Heat would need. I would make that trade for him. All right, let's get to the last two guys here real quick. We're not going to talk about Okpala because he didn't talk about Okpala, and we've done other episodes on Okpala. But Nunn.
By the way, he's the guy you throw before Duncan. I'm just going to make that comment.
All right, but Nunn and DJJ. Okay. I thought it was interesting. First, how many times he talked about Kendrick. He kept bringing him into the conversations. Without being provoked, but also with DJJ, he said flat out, I felt sorry for him because he just got squeezed by Andre and Jay. After you heard, let's start with DJJ. After you heard his comments about DJJ, do you think there's any chance they re-sign him to any kind of money?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a signal. Like Pat does a lot of signaling, like you guys have been talking about, but I just think it really comes down to, well, are you willing to play ball with us? Because we're not going to be paying you like that. Like, as cold as that sounds, I just don't think that they're going to be dedicating any of these limited options they have towards adding people and financially towards Derrick Jones Jr. I think he's going to get, I mean, if he does get those nice offers and if he still wants to play ball with the Heat, then yeah, I think they should work with him. I think this is a guy that, is Bam's best friend. Is probably his biggest contribution to the team. And I say that, tongue in cheek. I like Derrick's game. I think he could still get better. Obviously, I still think he's a useful defensive player, but I'm really talking about him taking like a biannual exception or something like that. Or maybe, a portion of the regular mid-level exception. I think he would really have to play ball with the team in that way. I just don't think giving him the full mid-level is the best thing they could do, even if it's for a 1 or 2 year deal. I think they have just way better use of the money, especially given that Iguodala and Crowder are here now. I think that would have been different if they weren't, but if Derrick Jones Jr. is willing to play ball to that type of level, or maybe they give him an opt-out on a multi-year deal for the biannual. I don't know if that's in play or not, but you know what I'm saying? I think it would have to be him playing ball with the team, because I don't think he's played well enough to the point where he should be making demands. I think it's like, well, if you want to go ahead and take the offers to play with those teams, I mean, Atlanta with Trae Young, like I think he would be a great one. Like I think that one makes a lot of sense. He would be close to, and he would be still playing in the same division as Bam and whatever. But all the other ones are pretty trash situations right now, right?
Well,
maybe you could sell yourself with Cleveland.
Yeah,
but
he'd be asked to do things in all those places that I don't think he's capable of doing right now.
I think Atlanta is a really, really nice fit, because he could just catch lobs all day, and they run through Trae and the pick and roll through them, so it'll be easy for him there. But other than that, it's just like, take the money and go play with a young team that's not going to be good, or take that veteran pay cut that veterans do to play on winning teams and do that. I think it's really up to him at this point. I don't really know if I do think the Heat will be willing to play ball, but that's just a guess.
I think that he's likely going to go take the money. And I know how highly he's spoken to the Heat organization, but I think if he's getting advice around him, it's okay. You can get better here. You can compete for championships, but we can't guarantee you're going to be in the rotation right away. And so you may be stuck in the same situation you're in this year. We don't know if Crowder's coming back. We don't know
maybe
if
even worse.
Replace him with somebody. We don't know how, whether
they're going to add a draft pick.
Right. You got another draft pick and you got KZ.
Like,
so
exactly.
I think that
it's not great.
So it may be kind of crowded in terms of, finding the minutes for him. And so he may get the advice that is, look, okay, you can always come back to a place like Miami in 2 or 3 years, go get your money. All right. It's probably not going to work out somewhere else. So probably the people around him won't tell him that, and see how it goes. And then you can when you're 25, 26, 27, you can start looking for a place like Miami. If you haven't become what you want to become in this other city. But I do fear for him that if he goes to a Detroit, he goes to a Knicks, he goes to Sacramento, he goes to one of these bad teams that overpays guys like him based on potential, and then they don't have the infrastructure, the coaching staff to bring it out of him, and then it doesn't work out, and then he starts getting criticized for how much money he's making. I mean, we've seen this so many times, but I still think somebody around him is going to tell him to do that, and so I think that's most likely. All right, let's close here with Kendrick Nunn. As I mentioned, Riley kept bringing him up. We know that he's a potential trade chip. We know they have to rehabilitate his value, but we also know he was first team all rookie. He was second in rookie of the year voting. And they kept talking. Riley did say, if we can get him back to where he was, I don't think he's that far away. I mean, we saw glimpses of it in the finals. So is there any chance that, I mean, Kendrick Nunn is a core rotation piece next year instead of being a piece that's being flipped into a trade?
No doubt. I mean, really could see it going both ways. I'm not that down on him at all. The only thing I'm down on regarding Kendrick Nunn is just like we've talked about. He is the first guy that you're really willing to trade when you're just comparing him to the rest of the, core pieces on the team. But other than that, like I still believe that he's a shot maker. And even if I don't think he's the same level of prospect of a Herro or Duncan Robinson, I do believe like averaging 15 points per game, even knowing the role that he was in was a very ideal and cozy one for him. Still being able to do that as a starter, like I just think nobody saw that coming. I do think he's an advanced shooter already. Like I think it would take guards a couple of years to be that efficient as just coming off a screen and shooting and being efficient all year as a starter. And like the units of with him and Myers out there, we know how limited they are defensively. They were still good enough. And that's kind of like I think of Nunn as this. He's definitely a useful player. He's an offensive player right now. I do think he could develop into a better defensive player. I'm not done with that at all. Like I do think he was a rookie. He showed that. And I think little by little, he's going to get better on these little things, making reads and just being in the right spot defensively, doing the right thing. He's going to be playing in the same system. So I do think for sure he'll be just as good. I think it really depends on what type of role they give him, though. If he's back in the starting lineup, I think he'll give you really similar production to what you saw this season, maybe with some improved reads, just slightly getting better on the margins. It'll be a little bit tougher. He's coming off the bench. I just think that Spo knows what to do with his type of talent. He knows the limitations. He knows what he's good at and how to get him open. So that's why I do think I'm counting in Nunn until further notice as a rotation player.
There have been a lot of examples over the years of guys we thought that the Heat would trade that they did not, and they held on to them. And then
other teams might not be high on Nunn.
Well, they may not be, but I think enough of them. I look, if we say the teams can talk themselves into Derrick Jones Jr. having a big role, they certainly can talk themselves into a guy who averaged 15 as a rookie. Okay, I mean, there will be teams that just need someone to put the ball in the basket. I mean, there are a bunch of those teams. I mean, you talk about Detroit. I mean, who do they have to do it, right? I mean, they may lose their best player.
They're about to throw a lot of money at Van Vliet.
Okay, well, somebody like that. But then, okay, so what if Van Vliet goes there and maybe Toronto looks at him and is like, okay, he's a replacement in the backcourt. In other words, there are teams that will view a guy who can score as somebody. There's players. If you can score in this league,
I mean,
you will find a spot for a long time unless you're Michael Beasley. I mean, there is always going to be a spot for you.
Yeah. I mean, Philly could use him, right? Like just more shooting, another guy who could put the ball on the floor. Not that he would solve all their issues, but I just think like he could find a lot of pretty easy fits for him. I don't think he's he's like a Lou Will type where he does everything with the ball in his hands. Like I think he showed that he's more than willing, more than capable of playing as an off-ball guy. Like I think we kind of saw him maybe throughout the first half of the season as a scorer, when in reality he's more of an off-ball player. And I think he's an excellent one, especially like considering given the the age and the experience that he has. I think he's really ahead in that aspect. Like he was very good at coming off curls and knowing whether to shoot right there. It's, taking an extra dribble and pull up, like just making those simple reads as a shooter and playing that role. I think that's a useful player. The thing with Miami, why we always throw him in, besides the order of prospects that you like, is that their defense, right? And we know that they're gonna probably re-sign Goran, and then that just puts you back right where you were before as far as not having great defensive guards. And like I said, you hope and expect for him to get marginally better, but I think that's why he's such an easy candidate for a trade. It's the order, and then it's the defense thing. I think they would prefer to get better on defense, but I still think Kendrick Nunn is going to be a good player, man. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's just back to putting up 15 points a game next season.
I think we did the order correct, though. I think, obviously, you look at Untouchables. It starts with Bam. It goes to Herro. I think there's a little bit more wiggle room with Duncan, but it's got to be the perfect kind of situation, or a player like Drew that's the only way they can get it. And
Drew is the line, huh?
And then I think it's Nunn, who's the guy who is, okay, this is the guy we'll give you, can be a productive player for you, but if not, we're happy keeping him. And I think that's where they're at. We'll talk about KZ Okpala another day. Make sure to check out the other episodes in this series. We're going to do another one. Greg Sylvander is going to join us to talk about the veterans on the roster, particularly the free agents, and where they go from there. Check out 5reasonsports.com. Check out my new show on Onside Radio every day at 10 a.m. and download the Dash Radio app.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5
on the floor.